Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk a little bit about a DMR course that I took over the weekend. So before I continue into that, just want to let you know that I do have audio equipment. I don't know how this is going to turn out. I have messed with it a little bit, but this is my first official video shooting with this equipment. So let me know how it turns out, and if it's not up to par, just bear with me. I'll eventually figure it out. But to the topic at hand, the DMR course I took. Now, it was put on by a company called Whisky Hotel. Now, Whisky Hotel is owned by James Heldman. He is a veteran of the U.S. Army, served 13 years in the infantry. He did 2 tours overseas, one to Iraq and one to Afghanistan, and he also earned his CIB. During either both of those deployments, or at least one of those deployments, he did serve as a long-range marksman, and he was a reconnaissance section sergeant for an armor brigade. He attended the U.S. Army's Squad Designated Marksman 2-week course, as well as attended Leupold School at Camp Perry. In 2017, he was a combat rifle runner-up, and in 2018 was the combined arms champion. He is also a Governor's 20 tab holder. So James is a squared away dude, really cool, down to earth, super nice, and you can tell that he really cares about the training and the information that he's putting out there. Now, he does have a group of instructors that he employs. So first up, we have Frank Steed, who is a veteran, an Army veteran, served 20 years with Army Special Forces. He is also a mentor of James, and they did serve together on, I believe, one of their combat deployments. Under him, or next up, we have Norman Waldron, who served in the Army Infantry. He attended the U.S. Army's Squad Designated Marksman course, Jungle Warfare course, and the Mountain Warfare course. Next up, we have Nam Guyan. I hope I pronounced that right. If I didn't, I apologize. He is a GSSF Masterclass shooter. Really cool guy. I forgot my bipod, and he took his bipod right off his rifle and allowed me to use it for the course. So, huge shout out to Nam. Thank you very much for doing that. You didn't have to do it, but I really do appreciate it. Next up, we have Eli Wood, who is a veteran of the United States Marine Corps and has a combat deployment. And then lastly, we have Jason Kyle, who's a personal friend of mine. He is also a competition shooter and focuses primarily on marksmanship style discipline. So whether it's PRS or snipers unknown, things like that, that is his forte, and he's a very, very good shooter. I've trained with him in the past, squared away, good dude. Now, about Whisky Hotel as the company, their mission statement is to bring a quality, affordable training to the civilian market. The other thing that he emphasized was bridging the gap between the tactical side of the house and the competition side of the house. So, covering all that, there is a course curriculum that he has. Now, I believe that they do other stuff aside from DMR stuff, but DMR work is his forte. And they do have a DMR 1, 2, and 3 course. I took DMR 2. DMR 1 is the basics of marksmanship shooting. And, they go over, position, cheek, well, like doing all the basic stuff. They get into target ID, how to draw and use range cards, range formulas, gun numbers, their wing calls, the whole 9 yards. And in that particular class, which I think is really cool, that I really haven't seen with other schools, they had the entire lineup of instructors attend that class so that there's more access to the instructors for the students, so that they really get a full understanding of what what everything is, because sometimes it can be like drinking from a fire hose and you don't really grasp everything. So having that one-on-one time with instructors allows you to slow things down and give the instructors the opportunity to really get you to fully understand what it is that they're teaching, which I think is a really cool thing. DMR2 we're not going to talk about yet because I'm going to cover that in the video. And then DMR3 essentially is putting everything you learned from DMR 1 and 2 with some refinements, and then primarily self-work. So, and in that course, it, like I said, is more refinement and just going over several field exercises that will test everything you learned, and then also going over how to make range cards on the fly, prioritize your targets, range without a rangefinder, target engagement, spotting targets that are camouflaged, which we covered a little bit of that in DMR2. But from what I gather, comprehensive, and if it's anything like the DMR2 class, it's going to be well worth it. So, course loadout. What was the course loadout for this DMR2? A quality, reliable rifle. Doesn't matter what you run, just as long as it's a reliable rifle. One guy ran a IWI Galil with a Leupold scope on it. I shit you not. I will roll in a picture now so you can see. It was awesome, and he rocked the hell out of that Galil. So shout outs to that dude, man. But a quality rifle, you at least 12.5 inches or longer. You need a magnified optic, 4x or larger. It doesn't have to be variable. It could be a fixed 4x like a ACOG prism. 4 mags, a sling, and 200 rounds of the same lot ammo. It doesn't have to be matched. However, that will help you be more consistent, especially when you're trying to spot your shots and make corrections. I will say I would bring 300 rounds next time because I ended up going through 240 in a class, but I'll touch on why that was later on in the video. Optional stuff was bipod, your dope book, knowing your bullet drop before you got to the class. Things that the shooters needed was the ability to carry 4 mags, an IFAK, adequate water supply, and an empty GP pouch because we were using smoke grenades. And that was pretty much it for the course loadout. Now, to jump into the course itself. So to reiterate, it was a designated marksman rifle course 2, and it was held at Fort Harmar Rifle Club in Marietta, Ohio, put on by Whisky Hotel. So class started at 8:30. On the half-hour lead up to 8:30, we went through some safety briefings, and we received a packet that went over some of the information for the course, to include the 4 T's, which I'll display now for you. And then we verified our zeros, whether it was 100 yards or a 50-yard zero. We were able to verify our zero, and if you didn't have your velocity already, you would gather that at that point because he did have 2 lab radars set up. So if you didn't know your velocity, you could gather that information while you were zeroing. Additionally, if you don't know your drops, he did have multiple apps and did help some students set up what their roundabout drops were based off their velocity, and they're set up using either applied ballistic or stray lock. So after going over the packet and the safety brief, doing a zero, verifying our velocity, we jumped right into the whiteboard and we went over gun numbers. Now, following that, my buddy Jason took over and started going over wing calls. Now, this part of the class, there's not a whole lot of practical application because there wasn't much of any wind, but we did go over, what a quarter value, half value, full value, mirage, how to read wind, stuff like that. And then once we wrapped that up, we went right into shooting. So the first up was the post-it note drill. So post-it note drill is 2 rows of 3 post-it note size squares with 2 of those squares vertical underneath the 2 rows of 3 above. And what we did was we would go over positional shooting, 3 rounds each position, and then we would go and assess it. So the positions were prone, front supported only, no rear bag. So whether it was a bipod or a backpack or something, you could support the front of the rifle, but you couldn't support the rear other than using your hand. And there were some techniques they showed us, like supporting the buttstock and then grabbing the strap of your chest rig or your plate carrier to help stabilize the rear end. 3 shots at the top left box. Next up was prone mag rested. That was the top center box. Then the top right box was prone unsupported. So obviously in they're prone, just on your elbows, not resting the rifle or anything. The 2 vertical boxes, the top box was kneeling or sitting unsupported. So whichever one you were more comfortable with, I did kneeling. And then lastly, the bottom vertical box was standing unsupported. Then you would go down range, check out the targets, and see how each shooting position will actually change your point of impact and how each shooting position can affect the stability and your effectiveness down range. So obviously something like, kneeling unsupported was, I think, the most unstable for me. Sitting probably would have been, but with my hips, I can't sit like Indian style. So, excuse me. I chose to do kneeling, but I did get better over the class with that. But anyway, you can see how it was shooting different positions and aiming at these little boxes and seeing how some groups will open up because you weren't as stable as others, or like shooting prone mag rested shifted my point of impact low to just under the box, whereas my prone front supported, I was right in the box. So those are little tidbits of information that you can have going forward, knowing if you ever have to make a shot like that, say hunting, you're trying to take a shot on a whitetail, some of those positions are going to change your impact. Now that may not matter at 50, 60 yards, but say now you got to do it at 200 yards. Now hey, if I'm doing it, mag rested with, say, a 308 platform or whatever, then I got to hold a little bit higher because my point of impact is going to be low. So that was really cool. Moving on, we did a blind swordsman drill, and basically that was shooting at a 12x12 steel plate at 220 yards, essentially blindfolded. We weren't actually blindfolded. However, we did have to close our eyes once we got into our natural shooting position or a natural point of aim, and then having one of our partners cover the front of the optic so you can't cheat. And what was really cool is that during that time, sticking your arm out, sweeping across the side of the rifle, and then learning how to get that stock into the center or that natural pocket in your shoulder. And that was really cool. And then being in your natural shooting position, how effective it is that even if for any reason something took away your ability to see, you would still be so stable that you can take that shot not just once but multiple times and still make accurate hits on target. And both me and my shooting partner Mike, who is a former Marine and we met that day, was we did awesome, and he was a hell of a shooter and we knocked it out. From there we went to a shooter spotter team, and one of us would be the spotter, one would be the shooter. We would call out targets and then make corrections if there were any misses, and we did that from 2 to 500 yards. Then we transitioned to a shooter concept, which was still in teams. However, we would both identify a target, and in this particular case there was 4 12x12 plates lined up side by side, and we would start with the left, engage that. So Mike would engage the first target, he hits it, I immediately engage the second target. I hit it. He immediately engages the third target, and then so on and so forth, to show that it's a very fast and effective means for shooting and engaging targets accurately and quickly. Now, the cool thing about it is that because you guys are both identifying the same target, if Mike shot, in this case, Mike shot and missed, I would immediately follow up with a shot on that first target. And if I hit, Mike would immediately move to the second target, and then so on and so forth. So it was really cool, really, really effective means for target engagement and identification, whole 9 yards. From there, we did a series of drills, and essentially it was engaging targets from 2 to 500 yards. However, we would start out standing, and you would take a shot at a target. So starting out at 200 yards, take a shot standing, boom, you hit it, you move to the next target. If you miss 3 times, then you default to a kneeling or sitting position, and then you would make contact on that target and then continue in that position going forward. And if you miss 3 times, then from there you would go to the prone and continue forward. And we did that out to 500 yards. I was able to go out to 400 yards standing, 450 yards kneeling, and then we didn't shoot the 500 because where we were positioned didn't really have a line of sight, and we were just trying to speed things up because we spent a lot of time on that particular iteration. Once we were done with that, we went right into barricades. So there was a little talk about different positional shooting and using what you have and going through all these different things. However, when we started shooting, we got to actually try out a lot of cool stuff. So we did shoot off of barricades and bipods and an improvised like barricades and stuff like that. So we use the backpack where we take the one strap, sling it over our neck, and then have the backpack here so we can stabilize the back of the rifle while using a bipod up front, using 2 sticks and some 550 cord to make a improvised set of shooting sticks, using a trench tool or E-tool to be able to set up an improvised barricade or stabilizing shooting base, basically sitting down and resting the rifle on the handle of the trench tool, stuck in the ground. There was a ton of different things that we were taught that were really cool, and the whole purpose of it was for that, to get you to think about what you have on you that are potential tools to aid you in being accurate should you have to make a shot. Everywhere you shoot is not going to be a perfect setup the way a shooting range is, a static shooting range with benches or a place to go prone. Sometimes you got to improvise or shoot from awkward positions, and these are ways that you can utilize to be able to make those shots in those positions and be very effective. From that, keeping in line with the theme of barricades and tripods, we started moving to different elevations. So we walked up this steep hill, and then we're shooting from different elevations at targets at like 250 and 300 yards off of tripods, and also off the side of one of them was off the side of a building. So in one iteration you were shooting off the left side of the building. So for me, I switched to my left side to minimize my exposure. It's basically shooting offhand, and then using my left hand as basically my trigger finger, and then making shots at like 250. First round hits, no problem. But in that case, what I did was I flipped my bipod open and used the right leg to press up against the building and stuck my hand right in between the legs of the bipod so that it kind of acted as a rest. But really only part of the rifle and part of my face and shoulder were exposed, just enough to get behind the rifle and to make consistent hits. Now, we transitioned to the other side of the building, but because of the angle of the shooting, the building was in the way, so we had to actually shoot standing unsupported and make hits. And being able to use your sling and everything to get super, super stable, or as stable as you could possibly get, and then making like first round impacts was pretty cool. But one of my favorite things about that was actually using your sling as a means of a improvised rest, so to speak. So there was a portion where we walked up to a tree. The tree was probably about that round in diameter, maybe 12 inches in diameter. And what we did was we took our sling and took about 6 inches, and while keeping the rifle on the right side of the tree, put the slack of the sling against the tree and pressed out and leaned against the back of the rifle, or leaned into the buttstock on the right side, and got super, super stable. And that was probably my favorite position to shoot from, because it felt natural, and you were so stable. You didn't feel like a lot of pressure pulling on your hand, or feeling like you had to compensate and push harder with your left hand. You were just able to lean in and just be extremely stable. And that's something that's going to be really, really helpful for people who are hunters, and they hunt, bear or deer or whatever. Being able to just lean up against a tree like that, get super stable and take your shot. That's really cool, and was my favorite positional, improvised positional shooting. So all that was part of the barricades and tripods and improvised shooting positions. From there, we took a quick lunch, and then we jumped right into a react to contact exercise and some team movement. They had a vehicle. We would sit in the vehicle, and then we would take contact from a certain side, in this case being the left side of the vehicle, and they would set off firecrackers to implement, or to play out being shot at, and then set off cherry bombs and whatnot to replicate explosives going off. And we would exit out the non-contact side of the vehicle, so the two individuals that were on the non-contact side would exit. Front man will go to the front of the vehicle, rear guy will go to the rear of the vehicle, and immediately start engaging targets. So they would call out, contact left side 400 yards, and we would start engaging. The people on the contact side would immediately start engaging, returning fire essentially, and then once we started returning fire and providing cover fire essentially, they were able to exit out the non-contact side. The rear guy had the smoke grenade, and he would throw it. Now the video you're probably watching now of us doing it is that iteration. We didn't use the smoke bomb or the cherry bombs to set off, but we did use it later on. I just didn't get the footage of it. And then what we would go from there, we would start bounding from cover to cover, and we would bound in succession. We wouldn't bound beyond. So basically a push technique. Those two would immediately start bounding. They would bound out further. Then, say me and the other individual that were on the non-contact side would bound close to them, but not beyond. And then once we were set, they would bound further, and then we would continue that until they called the ceasefire. Very cool, practical. I've done it in other classes. I love doing stuff like that. But there's some things that I'll cover at the end about that I would like to see done differently. Moving on. After that, we went into a timed shooter competition for a little fun, engaging targets from 200 out to 500, and then back down to 200. And there was these little head silhouettes behind a berm that you have to engage to end the competition, and it was timed. So basically, whoever had the best time kind of won the deal. I think the fastest time was 38 seconds that it was done, and it was, again, done in a shooter concept. So one person would shoot. If they didn't connect, the next person would immediately follow up with a shot on that. If they connect, you move to the next target, so on and so forth. To wrap everything up, the final drill was a DMR qualification. So this was shot from a distance of 100 yards on paper targets, and it was an EIC combat target. There was a little piece of tape over the X in the center of the target to show where the X ring was, and the drill went as follows. So you would stand with your rifle slung with the bipod stowed in the ready position. And then on the sound of the whistle, you would immediately drop down and engage your targets, or whatever the position was. So these were the positions. The first position was prone front supported. 3 shots in less than 15 seconds. So you have 15 seconds to deploy your bipod, get in position, and make 3 solid hits. Next position, obviously resetting to a slung rifle with the bipod stowed, was prone unsupported. 3 shots under 15 seconds in the center of the target. Resetting with the rifle slung and the bipod stowed, we went to kneeling or sitting unsupported, center of the target, 3 shots, 15 seconds or less. Reset again, we had barricades, or at least barrels, to imitate or mimic shooting off of a barricade. So that was getting into position behind the barricade, engaging the target, 3 shots, 15 seconds or less. And then lastly, after resetting with our bipod stowed and our rifle slung, was not standing up supported. It was shooting from side of the building. So we had chairs set up to mimic shooting from the side of the building. So you were able to put your hand on the chair, but you couldn't rest the rifle on the chair. You had to have the rifle on the side, mimicking that the rifle was on the side of the building. And again, at the sound of the whistle, you would get down, get in position, make 3 accurate shots in 15 seconds or less. We did, the first iteration was pretty much like a practice run for everybody. And then the second time we did it, I probably would have smoked it or aced that drill. However, I put 2 rounds on somebody else's target, and sometimes that fixation, you don't realize which target is what, especially when they all look the same. So obviously that was our mean. Those shots didn't count. So I didn't make the cutoff for expert marksmanship, and then we shot it one last time, and in that case I did qualify for expert marksman, which is why I got this patch right here. So that's the expert marksman badge there. I think the max score is 75. You need a 65 to qualify expert, and I got 67 on it. So once that was done, that was the conclusion of the class, and then we went into basically the AAR and debrief, and then cleaning up the area. Really cool time. It was a beautiful area of Ohio, my first time ever going there, and the instructors were all great. They were super nice, very helpful. The one thing that was really cool is they handed out their certificates to everybody for attending and completing the course, which is an 8-hour course, a one-day 8-hour course. And then at the end, they selected either an individual or multiple individuals based on their how well they did throughout the course. So I was one of 3 guys to receive the Certificate of Excellence for outstanding performance in the designated marksman craft, and I was one of 4 guys to qualify marksman out of the class. I think we had 11 people at the class or something like that, but it was a really awesome time, and I learned quite a bit, primarily from positional shooting and improvised shooting. That was where I learned like the most, because I've had quite a bit of training prior to. So speaking of the training, this is what I ran here. This is my 12.5 I ran, suppressed with an AAC can that I had converted so that I can run a Griffin armament taper mount. It's a 12.5 barrel from Triarch Systems. The optic is the Primary Arms PLX-C, which is the compact version with the Griffin Mill reticle, and the Geisley trigger, SSA, or not SSA, G2S trigger. Rifle ran flawlessly. It was super accurate. This optic is absolutely amazing. I know I did a little review on it prior to, but absolutely flawless. I think I ran it between 4 and 6 power the entire time, and yeah, this is a perfect setup for what I wanted, and kind of confirmed my ideas that it would be accurate and effective out to 500 yards. Very, very good setup. I ran this right here, which is AAC 77 grain OTM precision ammo, and it performed flawlessly. This is probably my favorite ammo, and pretty much what I'm going to get from here on out. So overall, my thoughts on the class: fantastic class, learned quite a bit. The only thing that I would change personally would be the emphasis on sustained rates of fire, primarily when we're going into the movements, react to contact with the team movements. I would go and I would go over sustained rate of fire so that people aren't just mag dumping. Now, I already knew this from training prior, so I maintain a sustained rate of fire. But even with that sustained rate of fire, I still went over the round count for the class. So that is why I stated earlier that I believe 300 rounds should be the minimum for the class. That would be one of my suggestions to you guys, and also the emphasis on sustained rates of fire, because not only does it help you manage your ammunition, it also helps with the ability to communicate with your teammate. So I would say sustained rate of fire is the one thing that I would change up, or at least put an emphasis on. Aside from that, I think it was a fantastic class. I love it. I do recommend it for those that are interested in a DMR type course. As of right now, I was invited to come back in September. I believe September 16th is the next class, is their DMR1 class. If I can, I'd like to be there. However, I got two things that might prevent that, so hopefully I can make that happen. If not, I'll catch on the next one, and I think in November there is a DMR3 course. They also do competitions there, so they'll do night shoots and all types of stuff, which I think is awesome. August 19th, they have their team rifleman ruck competition. So you're basically rucking a distance of 3.5 miles and then engaging targets or stages in between those 3.5 miles. So that's August 19th. I'll be there with my shooting partner, Chris. So we're already getting into rucking and getting ready for that competition. So with that being said, let me know what you think about this course, if you think it's going to be worth it for you or not. I think it's going to be worth it even for an experienced shooter. So again, that was the DMR2 course from Whisky Hotel. And yeah, really good class. I can't wait to take another one, and hopefully you guys will make an effort to get out there and check it out for yourself. It's worth it. The course was only $150, so quality, affordable. So thank you guys for watching, and I will catch you in the next video. Thanks.